Good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking out your time and coming to the class tonight. We are living in turbulent times, and the current events we're plagued by fears, global terrorism, questions about the nuclear deal, is it good or is it not good? The ISIS has on the rampage in the Middle East, and they're threatening to come to Europe. Tragedies befall families, and there's a rise in anti-Semitism. There's not a week that goes by, or sometimes a day, without some daunting news items. It's very frightening, and it causes someone to live in fear and anxiety about what the future will bring. But we could calm our nerves, have some peace of mind, by seeing and understanding the Hashkafas HaTorah, the Torah perspective about these areas of our lives. First thing I will discuss is the current events. For example, the foreign policies of the government, outcome of elections, constant wars, etc. First, we must realize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, controls the world. We all know that Hashem controls the world. We have to live it and we have to feel it. There's an interesting Gemara in Masechtas Sanhedrin about the times before Mashiach, that one of the signs of Mashiach is that Pnei Hador ke Pnei HaKelev, that the face of the generation will be like the face of a dog. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to look like dogs, but it means they will act in a way like a dog acts. So what does that mean? So the Chavetz Chaim brings down an interesting explanation from Isla Volozhin, the son of Rav Chaim Volozhin, who was the prime Talmud of the Vilna Gaon. And he says as follows: when a person is harassed by a dog in the street, and he wants to get rid of him, so he'll pick up a stone, he'll pick up a stick, and he'll throw at the dog. The dog gets angry, and he goes at the stick, or he goes at the stone, he steps on it, and he tries to, that he's angry at the stick, but he doesn't realize that the stick is totally inanimate, didn't do anything. It's the person who threw the stick, that's the one who controlled what happened. So the same thing he says that today, translating in today's times, that people blame the president, the government policy, the European Union, the EU, and their influence on whatever it is, for things that are going on. They're influenced by the media, who report the news in that way. This is actually what the Rambam writes in Hilchos Deos. He says, that people are influenced by their actions, right, and the opinions of their friends, of the people, and they act like the people of the country. Therefore, they attribute all the current events by mistakes or policy of the government, the president, the prime minister, irresponsible ruling power, Democrats, Republicans, left or right, and they think if it would change, it would all be okay. But that's the mentality of a dog. Chazal say, Leiv Malachim Lashem, that the heart of the kings God controls the heart of the kings. He controls how they act and what they will think. Therefore, the wars, the uprising, any rebellions, the Iranian nuclear deal, whatever the outcome is, some say it's a tragedy. If you don't do it, some say it's a tragedy. If you do it, right? I'm not going to that now. The outcome of elections are all from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. One commentator said that the Iranian deal is so bad that it couldn't be by accident. Therefore, it has to be out of hatred of the Jews. So he's half right. It's not by accident, but it's because Hashem decreed it. It came directly from Hashem. The people, we are the pawns in the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Satmar Rebbe once had a very interesting insight into this. The previous Satmar Rebbe, Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum, said as follows: there was an incident that they wanted to publish a newspaper in Satmar. Before they had the Frum newspapers were being published, Satmar wanted to have their own newspaper with the Frum news for their community. So the person who was going to fund it and publish it went to the Rebbe, and he asked if he will agree to it, because if he doesn't agree to it, it won't have any success. So he said, let me think about it. He thought about it, he came back to him, and he says, I can't agree. He says, why? Because when we write the news items, we must write in every news item that this is what Hashem wants. Hashem is controlling it. In order to do that, for me to give an agreement, my haskama to it, I have to read every news item, and I can't do that. I can't take the responsibility. So therefore he couldn't okay that. The newspapers are all full of lies. They make the news, they don't report the news. Baruch Bar Leibowitz, the previous Rosh Yeshiva of communists before World War II, said, never believed what it said in the news. First of all the articles, every newspaper has their own version of what happened, and some don't report it at all. So as if nothing happened. So he says maybe the date of the newspaper is true, But the date is also not true because it's today's date with yesterday's news. So that's also not true. And he said maybe the name of the newspaper is true. He says in Russia, even the name is not true because in Russia the name of the newspaper is Pravda. Pravda means the truth. It's not the truth. You never believe what is said in newspapers. Therefore, we have to reframe our minds. And when we look at the news, when we hear the news, whether it's listening on the radio or reading it in newspapers, we want to know was will God, what Hashem wants from us. What is He up to now? Right? What is Hashem going to do now for the world? Not what He's going to do, what the President is going to do, what the UN is going to do. What is Hashem going to do now, the next day or the next week? There's interesting insight into this, further going to this. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are coming up, and there's a prayer that we say in repetition called Unasana Taikef. Right? It's a heartwarming prayer that's said 3 times in repetition, twice in Rosh Hashanah and once in Yom Kippur. In this prayer, in the Unasana Taikef prayer, we say, Rosh Hashanah Yikosevum, Uv'yom Tzom Kippur Yechosemum. That in Rosh Hashanah everything is inscribed, and in Yom Kippur everything is sealed. What's inscribed and what's sealed? Kama Yavrum, Kama Yivrein. How many people will pass in the world? How many people will be created in the world? Mi Yichyeh, who will live, Umi Yamus, who will die. Mi V'kitzai, who will die in his time. Umi Lo V'kitzai, suddenly he'll die not in his time. Mi V'mayim, who will drown. Umi V'esh, who in fire, whether it be burnt or chas v'shalom in a volcano. Right? It's all part of fire. Mi B'acher, who by the sword, which we see, in the Middle East that they're killing people by the sword. Umi B'chaya, and who by an animal, wild animal, which are the terrorists today, because they're actually wild animals the way they're killing people. Mi barav and mi batsama, whether it's through a hunger or through thirsting, through being thirsty. Mi dehydration would be batsama. Mi varash, who will be in a rash, which is noise, which is an earthquake. Mi b'magefa, who will die by diseases, by a plague. Mi b'chanika, who will be strangled. Mi baskila, who will be stoned, will fall from a cliff. Mi anuach, mi anua, who will stay in one place and who will wander. Which countries, which people will stay in one place and who will wander. Mi shaket, who will live in tranquility. Mi taref, and who will live in distress or will be agitated. Mi shalev mi yasar, who will suffer that year. Mi yoni mi yashir, who will be impoverished and who will become rich. Mi shafel, who will be degraded, who will lose the election. Mi arum, and who will be elevated. It's all decreed on Rosh Hashanah. Everything, includes whatever's happening in the world. Kadosh Baruch Hu is busy between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, writing it and sealing it, and then, right at that time. So when whatever happened this year, you look back this year, you project what happened. You should know that last Rosh Hashanah was all written down. Whatever happened this year in this world. Now, how do we change? Right? How do we influence Hashem's decisions? So if we say further, U'seshuva, U'svila, U'tztaka, Ma'avir, and Esrei HaGezerah. By doing tshuva, by repenting, by prayer, by tefillah, and by charity, by giving tzedakah, in other words, by improving ourselves, that's how we change the decree of Hashem. And that's what everybody's doing between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We're doing tshuva, introspection, we're davening, and we're giving tzedakah, we give people come around for tzedakah at that time. That's how we influence the decision on an individual basis. But how do we influence the decision on a collective basis, on a countrywide basis, on a world basis? So look at the Rambam. The Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva, when he speaks about this, the decree on Rosh Hashanah, he says as follows. He says that we know that in Rosh Hashanah, when a person is judged, Hashem looks at his merits and he looks at his averis, like a balance scale, and he balances it out. He says, just like Hashem looks at an individual person, he said, V'chein Medina, V'chein Kol Ha'olam. The country, right, America, and the whole world. And the state also, you can say that, the state of California, wherever you're in. Hashem judges them, right, the same with the merits and their averis. Now, which merits and which averis are we talking about? Not the non-Jews, right, we're talking about the Jewish people. So therefore, if we want to influence Hashem's decision on the world, or on the country, or on the state, we have to improve in our mitzvahs, do more mitzvahs, do more Torah learning, improve in our midos and our character traits. We have to concentrate more on tefillah, on davening, brachas, benching. Be careful we speak lashon hara. Do more chesed, kindness to other people. The list is endless in areas that we can improve. And each person has to see which areas need improvement and to work on those areas. And that's how we influence HaKadosh Baruch Hu's decision. right? Not by talking. Of course, we have made some people petition, and they'll write. It's our shtadlus, but we know that what does the trick is not going to write those petitions. Not that we have to daven. If the petitions are said and done, we still have to daven to Hashem and do what we do and improve ourselves. Last year there was a war. There was the Gaza War, which is called Operation Protective Edge. It was our tefillos, our davening, our tehillim, our Torah study that gave the Israeli army success and saved many lives. Just some of the statistics from that war. During those few weeks of the war, over 4,500 rockets were fired and mortar shells were fired on Israel. 4,500. 4/5 of them, more than that, more than 3,600, landed in open fields. 700 of them were intercepted by the Iron Dome. And there was a minimal amount of casualties, even one person, a Jew, dies is a tragedy, but only compared to what the onslaught, 70 people died, and many of them didn't die from the rockets, they died from shock or other reasons from it. So the BBC interviewed somebody from Hamas and said, how is it possible? How is it possible you fired 4,500 rockets and mortars and look what's going on? What are you doing to them? You just have a reign of terror, but you're not really accomplishing anything. So he answered as follows: we were more prepared in this war than ever before, but Hashem, God, is on their side. And we are waiting till Hashem gets angry at them, and maybe we'll have success. That's what's quoted. It's like the Mechashvim, the sorcerers in Egypt, that after the third plague was the Moshe did the third plague of lice, and they couldn't repeat it. They said, Etzva Elokimhi. It is the finger of God. They realized that God is doing this. So the guy even realized that it's the hand of God that's protecting the Jews. This was the first time that the Iron Dome was used in real combat. Any glitch in the computer system or any mistake in the intelligence could have made a tragedy. But no, it didn't happen. There are open miracles day after day. I'm going to mention some of them, but there are many more than this. There was a tanker filling up a gas station with 35,000 liters of fuel. That's more than 9,000 gallons of gasoline. A rocket was aimed. One of the rockets or mortar shells went into the gas station, landed right next to the tanker, not on the tanker, but next to it, and didn't explode. Now you can imagine if that would explode and 9,000 gallons of gasoline would have blown the whole city to who knows to where. Nothing happened. A miracle. Many of these shells and many of the missiles fell in empty apartment buildings, schools, in kindergartens, before the people came there or after they left. There's a story about some soldiers were entering an abandoned building. As they're walking in, they look up and they see a very interesting sight. There's a bird standing in the air. A bird. Now normally a bird, if he wants to stay in the air, has to flap his wings. He doesn't have any helium on him. Right? The bird was standing in the air. So how can that be? It's a live bird and he's standing there. So they took out their binoculars, took a close look, and they saw there's a very thin wire under the bird. The building was booby-trapped, which means if they would have walked in, somebody would pull the wire and the whole building will explode. So they shot at the wire, the bird ran away, and the building exploded. A miracle. Now, how come the bird happened to be there just at that time when the soldiers wanted to enter the building? Because we were davening, we prayed, we said Tehillim. Another incident where soldiers entered the building, and all of a sudden there was a suicide bomber. They approached a lady who was ready to pull a string and blow them up. Now there's no way to run away, right? In 2 seconds the whole building would collapse. So what did the soldier do? He screamed out, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. That's what a Jew does, right? And all of a sudden the lady froze. So she asked him, what happened? He said, I'm Jewish. She wasn't an Arab, she was Jewish. And she's been trapped in an Arab village with her kids. Please get me out of this village. Get me out with my kids. So they grabbed her, they got her kids and took her out, and they saved themselves. Now they could have sent a different suicide bomber there, a man or an Arab lady who couldn't care less, but doctor they sent a Jewish lady. Why? Because we were davening. There was another incident where a missile was headed towards central Tel Aviv. They fired 3 Iron Dome missiles at it, and it didn't intercept it. So they received a call from the army, be careful, there's a missile, right, get everybody ready, get all your ambulances ready, we don't know where it's going to land, right, be ready for the worst. All of a sudden, as the missile was flying over Tel Aviv, as if from nowhere, an eastern wind came out and blew the missile into the sea, to the Mediterranean. An open miracle. How did that happen? Because we daven. And the person who reported that, I think he did tshuva because he said, it can't be, there's no other way to explain such a thing. And the last miracle I wanted to mention was the miracle of the wheat fields. They planned that they were going to dig one of the underground tunnels, was going to go into a field that had wheat that was growing. The wheat was growing very high, like this high, and they would come out. They'd be camouflaged by the wheat. They'd come out from under the ground, and they'd make their attack. So 12 or 13 terrorists were planning to go under this tunnel, come out from the wheat fields, and just spray the place with bullets or whatever it is. Right before that happened, right? So the Beis Din of the Eidah Charedis were looking for dry wheat for their matzah. Now, what happened was that there was a rainfall after Pesach, and when rain falls on wheat that's finished growing, you can't use it for matzah anymore, because there's a problem of becoming chometz. So they needed a wheat field that was totally dry. And when they came to the Gazan border and they found this wheat field, they say, "Oh, we got to buy this wheat." So he went over to the owner and said, "We want to buy the whole crop from you." So, okay, no problem. When do you need it for? You need it for Pesach? You need it for this? So we'll wait another few weeks. And no, we got to do it right now. We have a mitzvah now. We got to do it. They cut the wheat field down immediately and took the wheat with them. So when the terrorists came out, they were sitting ducks. They came out and they were open. They had these balloons looking at the border. They saw all the terrorists come. There's a video clip of it. They killed 6 of them. The other 6 escaped in the tunnel. Now, why did all this happen at that time? They could have cut the wheat later, because we were saying Tehillim, we were davening. So that's what's doing. These are not coincidences, but the merits of Torah and Tefillah and Tehillim, keeps the Jews alive. This is really a Rashi in Tehillim. There's a Rashi in one of the Shir Malos that says, "Oindos hayu ragaleinu b'Yushalayim." Our feet stood on the gates of Jerusalem. What are the feet doing on the gates of Jerusalem? So Rashi says, because the Torah stood in Yerushalayim, it causes success in the war battles. Therefore, the more Torah that's studied in yeshivas and in kollels, the more success they will have in the wars. Not the opposite, let them serve the army. That's not going to do the trick, right? Because they're outnumbered anyway. It doesn't make a difference. We have to have miracles happen in order to save the soldiers and save the Jewish people. So that's the first area of current events. The next, I want to speak about the tragedies. And before I speak about tragedies, I have to give an introduction, is that there's a long way between the seichel, the brain, and the heart. In other words, sometimes you feel something in the emotion, I can explain it to you, it'll still hurt. Yiddish expression is tut weh. It's going to hurt you. And I wanted to focus on 2 tragedies that happened in the past year. One was in the Harnof massacre in last fall, whenever 4 people were killed while they were davening, when they came during Shachris. 2 terrorists came before they subdued them. And the second one was the one that happened more recently in Flatbush with the Sassoon family, whenever 6 of his children were burnt on Friday night, with the tragedy on Shabbos. I'm going to explain what we should learn from it, not why it happened. We don't know why, and you'll see why, but what we can learn with it. So going to the Harnof tragedy, we have to feel that Hashem runs the world, and their time came to die at that day. That they could have died unnoticed. One could have had a heart attack. One could have been in an auto accident. One could have had a disease. One could have had a stroke. It's a tragedy, right? 4 funerals, 4 levayas in one day in one neighborhood, right? But it wouldn't be so earth-shattering as if it happened then. But they died al Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying Hashem's name. Rabbi Akiva davened that he should die for Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying Hashem's name. Like the sons of Aaron, it says, B'kroivai HaKodesh, I want to be sanctified by holy people. They were holy people who died, and we have a tradition that somebody dies al Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying Hashem's name, does not feel any pain of death, and goes right in Gan Eden. So that's where they went. They didn't feel any pain, went right into Gan Eden at that time. Now again, it hurts. Families, right, don't have parents, they don't have fathers, but at least we understand a little bit what's going on in our seichel. So what's the message that we get from this? We don't know what the message is. But since it happened in a shul, happened during davening, so the Rabbanim say we have to work on keeping the sanctity of the davening and the sanctity of the Beis HaKnesses of the shul. We have to stop talking during davening. We come to shul to talk to Hashem, not to talk to our friends. You want to talk to your friends, go outside. Right? Somebody once showed me a post, if you come to shul to talk to your friends, when do you talk to Hashem? We have to talk to Hashem, not to our friends. We also have to improve on the mitzvah of a Mikdash Tiro, that we have to keep the sanctity of the shul. And the Chafetz Chaim writes harshly about people who engage in kalas roish and joking around in the shul, which is not proper, in front of the Yoram Kodesh with the Sifrei Torah are, who speak Lashon Hara in the shul. People get together and they start talking about everybody else, about other people, Lashon Hara, and they forget about even answering Amen because they're busy talking. On Shabbos they speak about business. Where'd you get that nice shaita? Where'd you get the nice outfit? Where'd you get this pair of shoes? Is there a sale going on? It's all prohibited on Shabbos. And in a shul, it's worse. People have these cell phones, the handheld phones, they go off. They should be totally off, not even on vibrate mode when a person goes to shul. When the cell phones were coming, and the handheld device, I call them cell phones, really smartphones, all the other things were being mass produced. So when I used to I travel many times during the year, and when I get to shuls, there was a sign there. If your cell phone goes off in davening, you have to give $5 to the shul. A penalty, right? I don't know if it was enforced, but I guarantee you, if that was enforced today, the shuls would have no problem with their budget. Unfortunately, we hear all the ringtones going off, or everything goes off. No matter what you say, people still they forget about it. Before one goes into the shul, yes, one of the preparations we have to wash our hands, get ourselves ready. Before you put towels and filling on, before the women goes there to go during the week, close that cell phone. Right? You don't have to have it on 24/7. Right? You can wait another while till you get the message. One Rav in the shul lamented and he said, Chazaras Hashatz, repetition to Shemon Esrei, is like Chazaras email. You're reading the email. People daven, they have the phone next to there, and they're looking here and there and there. And even if people start using these handheld devices to daven, right? But when an email is going to come, it's going to vibrate. You're going to see it. A message is going to come on them, right? So it's impossible not to get distracted. It has to be off. There's a halacha, by the way, that a person is not supposed to daven Shemon Esrei if he'll have something that distracts him. So in halacha it's brought down if he has to watch something that's very valuable, like a bag of diamonds or whatever it is. For example, somebody gave you a bag of valuables to watch. So when davening Shemon Esrei, you can't concentrate on your davening because you have the valuables there. You don't want anybody to take it. You don't want to get lost. So if you're davening, when the cell phone is going to vibrate, that's certainly going to distract you. Even if you don't answer it, you feel something moving, and maybe you'll give in to the HR and say, who's calling them? Many times I've called people on their cell phones, and I hear Shema Yisrael, Ava Rabba, they're davening, and they're trying to tell me that they're davening. I can't interrupt them. Why is their cell phone on? It should be off. So when I call them, a voicemail comes on. It tells you to leave a message, and that's why you have voicemails. Now, again, it's not sure exactly if this is the area of improvement that we should do, but even if it's not what is not the message that Hashem is sending us, any improvement is valuable to us. Rabbi Victor Miller gives the following example. He says, imagine if somebody put out a notice that on a certain beach there's a treasure buried there. He knows there's a treasure, somebody buried a treasure, and there's a lot of money in the treasure chest, whether it's golden coins or pearls or whatever, stones, valuable stones. So people start digging. He's digging and digging, he digs and he finds a wallet there instead. Somebody lost his wallet and he just left it there. The wallet may have $100, $200, nothing more with it advertised. So he's happy. At least he's $200 richer. He can't find the owner. He's happy with whatever he has. The same thing over here. When a person does introspection, how shall I improve myself? Whatever you improve yourself is worth something for yourself, worth something to Kadosh Baruch Hu, even if you don't get it right. But at least you have an improvement to do something. Okay, the next tragedy is the Sassoon family, that they were never burnt on Friday night. That 6 children were burnt. So I want to preface with, right, who knows Hashem's cheshbonos, his reasons, but I want to preface a story that's told by Rav Chaim Vital, the prime student of the Arizal, and it's recorded in one of the Sforim on Chumash called the Lekach Lev Chumash. The story goes as follows. Rachel lost her husband, right, the lady we call her Rachel, she lost her husband, and he left them with a family full of small children to raise their own family. She never got over the tragedy, and each Friday night when the family would sit together at Shabbos meal, she always sat quietly at the head of the table, sad and despondent. Although the children tried to alleviate her sorrow, Rachel was unable to forget the past. Week after week after week. Went on for like 1 or 2 years. One Friday night, she surprised her family, came to the Shabbos table in a state of happiness and tranquility. When the children asked her what happened, she related the following story. She said, last night I had a dream. I found myself in an unknown place. I saw many people running, and I followed them into a forest, till we approached a very bright region that was illuminated by the sun. The entire area had fields with sweet-smelling flowers and magnificent rivers. Basically, it was Gan Eden. She went a trip to Gan Eden. Suddenly, an elderly bearded man in a white robe approached me and asked if I'd like to see my husband. I was in a state of shock. With my heart pounding, I answered yes. I followed him until we reached another area that was enclosed by a golden fence. On the other side, I saw men dressed in colored robes studying Torah. The elderly man told me to wait there until the shiur ended, till the lesson ended, and then I would see my husband. When the man finished learning, someone came over to me, and I realized that it was Tati, right, my husband. I uncontrollably let out a scream, Avram! He said, why did you, is that you? He said, yeah, it's me. I couldn't compose myself. Why did you leave me at such a young age? She screamed at him. So he answered me in a calm voice. He said, you know that the true world is here, and that people are sent down to earth to complete what they fell short of accomplishing during the previous lifetimes, called Gilgul HaNeshamos. In English, it's called transmigrating souls. They come back a second time to rectify what they missed the first time. He said, in his previous life, I was a tremendous Talmid Chacham. I knew a lot of Torah, was a tzaddik. However, I did not marry and have children. I passed away. The heavenly court decreed that I must return to the world to marry and have a family. After I married you and had 7 children, I was called to return to Gan Eden, to my rightful place, where you saw me teaching Torah. She never knew that he was a Talmid Chacham at that time, because he was just a plain working person. He said, he told her again, you had a tremendous merit in marrying me and giving me my tikkun on neshama, the ability to rectify my soul. When you pass away, you will share my portion in Gan Eden. That's what he told her. So seeing this, now the Rachel continues, seeing this as an opportunity to discover the truth about certain things, I asked him a few more questions. How come our oldest son David has not found a shidduch yet? So he answered as follows, because his Vasheret is too young to marry. In 5 years, in other words, she was born later, 5 years somebody will approach you with a shidduch for him and provide for the entire wedding. Number 1. Number 2, there are many things, I just pulled out a few things, but there are many other things that she asked him. Another one was, why was our son Moshe taken to us when he was just 3 years old? What did he do? Did he deserve to die at such a young age? So he took me to a very honorable place. Tati took me to a very honorable place in Gan Eden, where I saw Moshe and asked him the same question. I saw my son, I asked him, why were you taken at such a young age? So he replied, I was born in a previous life to a very prestigious family. When I was an infant, there was a pogrom in our town, and most of the Jewish population was killed. I was taken by a non-Jew, right? And a few years later, I was ransomed by Jews and eventually became a Talmid Chacham. When I passed away, I was not able to receive my proper reward in Gan Eden because I nursed from a Gentile woman when I was an infant. Therefore, I had to return once again to the world to nurse from a Jewish mother. You have a tremendous merit in enabling me to achieve my tikkun. As you mentioned before, once that was accomplished, there was nothing else left for me to do in this world, and I returned to heaven to receive my share in Gan Eden. So then, Tati turned to me and said, you see, there are all answers to all of the questions. Whatever questions you have, there are answers that you have. And Hashem does not do anything bad. I have one request of you. Please try and be in a happier frame of mind. I cannot bear your sadness. And if you start being happy and content, you will receive an offer to remarry, which you won't be able to refuse. An offer you can't refuse. That's what he told her. Tati then disappeared. The elderly man escorted me back to the forest, and I woke up from my dream. From then on, her mood was completely transformed. She eventually remarried, as her husband told her. That's the end of the story. We say on Shabbos in the afternoon, in Tzidchaska portion, after Shemona Esrei of Mincha, Nishpatecha Tohaim Rabbah. The judgment of Hashem is like a deep abyss. We never know all the reasons. Chavis Chaim gives an example of somebody who comes to a shul. And the shul, the beam is in the middle where they read the Torah. The Gabbai is standing in the middle and he's calling out the Aliyahs. He calls the Kohen here, a Levi there, Yisrael there, another here, all over the place. A guest is there, doesn't understand why he's having so much trouble calling from all over the shul. He goes over to the Gabbai and he asks the Gabbai, says, why don't you make things easier for you? Instead of going haphazardly, take one side of the shul, let's say the eastern side, go through all the rows, then the west, then the north, then the south. So the Gabbai says, you're only here for 1 week, right? You don't know what's going on. This person just came back from a trip. The other person's wife just gave birth. This person's going away. This guy's Mishaber. All different reasons why he had to disperse, right, where he's giving me the Aliyahs. Chavis Chaim says the same thing. We're here only for 70 years, 80 years, 90 years. We don't know the cheshbonos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with his reasons for doing things. And there's an anecdote that's told. People say, Hashem, why did you do this? Why did you do this to me? You did this to somebody else. Why? Why? A heavenly voice comes out and says, you want to know why? Come and join me. Nobody wants to join him now. They want to live their life. Right? When the person joins the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they'll find the answer. Now there's an interview in one of the magazines with Gabriel Sassoon about this whole tragedy. And it's very interesting how he handled it and how he answered it. And I just took out certain parts which I want to read tonight. The interviewer said, how do you deal with the whole thing? So he said as follows. As I said at the Levaya, I was very concerned. 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 I was very concern The only way to survive is by totally surrendering to Hashem's will. We have to realize that our wishes are tiny and meaningless compared to what Hashem planned. I told you that my mother died when I was young. I didn't have emunah, I didn't have belief in Hashem then. I was angry at Hashem. I was only 15. I didn't know the Torah. I didn't know anything. I was angry at God for many years. It's only because I started learning the Torah that I started loving Hashem. When you study Torah, you see the beauty of Hashem and can start to serve Him with love and emunah, and that's what helps. Also, he said, whenever I find that I can help people cope with their own problems, it gives me strength. There was a guy in Eretz Yisrael who came to my shiva, when I was sitting shiva in Eretz Yisrael. He lost a lot of friends in the army, and after he got out, things didn't go so well for him. He told me that after hearing my hesped, my eulogy on my family, he felt that he could face life once again. That was very meaningful to me. I guess you can give chizuk to other people who have gone through tragedies because you went through, right, because you went through the worst tragedy yourself. That's what he told the interviewer. What gives me chizuk, what strengthens me in a way, is that because they all died together at one time. It proves to me that they were all karbanos, they were sacrifices for the Jewish nation. And he says how they died in a holy manner. It was Rosh Chodesh, it was Shabbos, it was the year of Shemitah, the 7th year, right? 7th day, the 7th year. It was the 7th month, counting from Tishrei. A whole bunch of 7. 7 is a holy number, may you know. It was the day that Nadav and Avihu were taken, the sons of Aaron, which says B'Krovei HaKodesh. So many simonim, so many signs of the Krovei HaKodesh. It is an achom, it's a comfort that they were on the level, that they were so pure, they had the faces of angels. That's what he said. Unbelievable somebody should be able to be so complacent and be calm and explained in such a way that he did. Now I wanted to interject one more thing from a different interview. In the Telz Yeshiva in Cleveland, there's one of the Rosh Yeshivas is named Rabbi Isaac Osband. His wife, it could be he did also, his wife survived the Holocaust. So she was once interviewed and said as follows. This is quoted from Touched by a Story, one of those books by the Art Scroll. She offers words of encouragement to a couple going through a very difficult time. He said, if you would have asked me before the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, came to Lithuania, I would have told you that I would have given any amount of money in the world not to have gone through the Gehenna that I endured during the Holocaust. But once I went through it, there is no money in the world you can give me to replace the closeness with Hashem that I have achieved because of this. And that's the same Gabriel Sassoon said. Tragedies happen. Gabriel continues to wake us up so we can see what's real and what's important in our life. Loving your children, loving your spouse, loving your fellow Jew. We have to consciously live with that and care about others. So the interviewer asked him, what can people do, l'zechel nishmasam, in their memory? So he said everybody should look into his own heart and fix whatever needs fixing. And we all know what to do. But Rav Miller says, why do we have to wait for a tragedy? Why wait? When the going is good, then we should think of improving ourselves. Why are we waiting so long for something to happen? And then all of a sudden, right, we're waking up. Wake up now before Chas v'Shalom another tragedy comes. Again, there's a long way between the seichel, between the intelligence and the heart, but reviewing these principles gives us some strength to cope with the tragedies, alleviate emotional stress, and have some peace of mind. Okay, the last subject I want to speak about is the anti-Semitism. Getting worse by the week, getting worse by the day. Generally speaking, when we speak about anti-Semitism, so I quote the pasuk in Eicha with the medrash on it. The beginning of Eicha, which we read on Tisha B'Av, it says, when the Jews went into exile, lo motza manoach, they found no rest. Right? And it says that in the Torah also, in this week's Parsha, in Parshas Kisavo, it says, Vagayim, when they go into exile, Uvagayim, lo hahem, lo sargia, they will not find tranquility among the nations. In other words, even after the Golus, we find the wandering Jew. He's always running from place to place. So the Medrash explains as follows. Why is he wandering? Because if he would have found a resting place, tranquility, he wouldn't want to come back to Eretz Yisrael. He wouldn't want Mashiach to come. He doesn't need the base of Midrash because he's happy the way he is. Right? Sometimes you go to someone in the street and say, maybe he become religious, but he'll be happy with his life the way he is. What does he need to become frum for? He can't do anything. Right? Until something happens, right, to him. So here also. So Rav Victor Miller used to explain that when Jews get too comfortable, right, so the first thing is they start assimilating with the non-Jews. start marrying them, becoming part of them, part of the society, and that's very bad. The Beis HaLevi says that we say in Havdalah, Hamavdil ben Kodesh l'chol, ben or l'choshech, between light and dark, and ben Yisrael la'amim, between the Jews and the nations. So he says it's a comparison between light and dark, and between the Jews and the nations.
Would you please repeat that?
Hamavdil ben Kodesh l'chol, ben or l'choshech, ben Yisrael la'amim. It's in Havdalah. Right? So he says as follows. Light and dark cannot coexist. Right? You close the lights off here, it gets dark. You put them on, it gets light. You can't have light and darkness in the same room. It says also Yisrael and Amim, they can't coexist together either. The Jews have to be separate between the Goyim to exist. That's why Bilam says, Hein Levodad Yishkon. They always dwell separately. So it's like a law of physics, law of nature, because the Baruch Hu has to keep the Jews separate from the Goyim, right? Or else they will assimilate. And that's by causing anti-Semitism. So they hate each other. They don't want to be with them. The second reason is because they're not yearning for the Gula, as you mentioned before. A Jew who is comfortable will not want to go back there. So it's not yearning the Gula. And this I want to bring an interesting story. They won't yearn for the redemption, for Mashiach to come. If they're too comfortable, they will not yearn for it. Because they're happy the way they are. Like I mentioned before, you go to a person, I'm happy the way, why should I become frum? I have a great life. I spoke to people like that. I once tried to convince somebody to come frum. I have the life of Riley, the life of I'm happy, whatever I live, I will have to keep kosher, keep Shabbos and this. I'm happy. So, same thing over here. So the Shloh says as follows. He says, why we don't feel the Churban or await Mashiach? He says, my heart was always ablaze upon seeing the children of Israel, the Jewish nation, building homes like castles and making permanent dwelling places for themselves in this transitory world. This appears as if one is inattentive, right, of the redemption. Therefore, my children, if Hashem blesses you with great wealth, don't build extravagant homes. Rather, build yourselves houses that conform to your real needs and necessities and no more. So the Shloh is saying as follows. The more a person becomes preoccupied with worldly matters, the more he will be embedded in them. Preoccupation with Olam Hazeh results in becoming oblivious to awaiting Mashiach's arrival. So even though the Shloh is addressing wealthy people, this applies to us too. We're not wealthy. If we're not wealthy, right? It applies to anyone. A person who gets involved in his own materialistic world can eventually become so attached and involved in it that he'll totally become, chas v'shalom, uninterested in the coming of Mashiach. And this concept is illustrated by the following anecdote, which is brought not by the Shloh, but it's also in the Sefer Lekach Tov. There was a Rav who was traveling from town to town, and he needed a resting place. So he stops at a farm, goes into the barn, and he gets a room on the top of the barn, in the attic there, and the farmer says, yeah, make yourself comfortable, go to sleep, tomorrow you can carry on your travels. Midnight comes, and he hears wailing from the attic. He says, what happened to the rabbi? He runs up, and he sees strange sounds he hears strange sounds emanating from the Rav's room. He went to the attic and found that the Rav was sitting on the floor, wailing and moaning. So he didn't know, he was taken aback by it. The farmer asked the Rav, are you feeling okay? You need some Tylenol, need some medical assistance. What happened to you? So the Rav said, everything's okay. What I'm doing is I'm reciting the nightly Tikkun Chatzos. Tikkun Chatzos is a special prayer that some people say at the midnight to be moaned and bewailed the base of Mikdash, destruction of the base of Mikdash. He was sitting on the floor, like on Tisha B'Av, he's sitting every night for a little while and saying, in certain Siddurim, just printed the whole text of it. Then he started to explain the essence and the purpose of the tefillah, and he saw the farmer was totally spaced out from it. So after the Rav concluded, he was so taken aback, the farmer didn't know what he was talking about. He said as follows, tell me, if Mashiach were to appear suddenly, would you be ready to pack your belongings and come with me immediately to Eretz Yisrael? That's what he asked the farmer. So the farmer thought a moment, and he said, this is an impossibility. My whole livelihood depends on our chickens, our geese, and our livestock. I can't go to Eretz Yisrael. So the Rav was, again, he was surprised at such an answer, taken aback. He said, what will you do if the Cossacks, who are presently on the rampage, approach your estate with the goal of killing every Jew in sight? Would you then think twice about your chickens, your geese, and your livestock? So the farmer thought again and replied, Rebbe, I hear your point. Let Mashiach come now, but when he comes, let him take the Cossacks to Eretz Yisrael. And I'll remain here with my farm, my chickens, my geese, and my livestock. So therefore we have to honestly examine ourselves if we are ready to abandon our present lifestyle, start a totally new life, is spiritually centered around service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's now. There's this famous story of Rabbi Chana Wasserman, when he came to America on a historical trip to collect money for his yeshiva in 1938, before World War II. So he was there for 2 years, traveling around. On the way back, he stopped in England. I did no plane travel. He went by boat, went to England, and he met one of the Torah sages, then Rebbe Yalapian. Rebbe Yalapian asked Rabbi Chanan, why are you going back? You know there's going to be a Holocaust, there's tremendous anti-Semitism, you don't know if you'll survive. Why are you going back? Rabbi Chanan said he felt it was time before Mashiach is coming, called Chedei Mashiach, the birth pangs of Mashiach. And he said, if Mashiach is coming, no place in the world will be safe. In England, America, wherever you are. Now, what's true about England was in the middle of the war. They were bombarded by the Nazis, right? Whatever it was. So that's what he said, and he went back, and his fate, he was killed in the Holocaust. Now, after World War II, I was always wondering, how did this come true in America and Australia, all these places, South Africa? Where is the danger of the world? Chali Mashiach. But one thing broke the ice, and that was 9/11. The tragedy of the Twin Towers in 9/11, everything came true. Started global terrorism, lone wolf terrorists, wherever it is, nobody knows what's going to be from one day to the next. People have guns all over the place. Hashem should watch us. So that's what's happening today. It's before Mashiach's times. This is people have suddenly get afraid. Let Mashiach come already. Or else he wouldn't want Mashiach. Everything is happening. We're now lit. Nobody's going to attack America. Right? So, but now, Chas v'Shalom, it shouldn't happen with Iran, with the ICBMs, what they're going to try to develop it. The other programs. So we have to make sure that Hashem wants to make sure that we're preparing for the Gula, so He gives us a jolt with this anti-Semitism. Another reason for anti-Semitism is as follows. When Yaakov stole when he stole the brachas from Esav, so Esav wanted to kill him. Rivka told him, flee and go to Lavan's house. Right? To Lavan. So he ran away. He went to Shem Ve'eva to the yeshiva. He studied there 14 years. Then he went to Lavan, worked 7 years for Rachel and Leah, came back with his whole family, and Hashem told him, now you have to go back to Eretz Yisrael. He was afraid. He was afraid of Esav. He sent shlichim, he sent messengers to find out what Esav was up to. He found that Esav was ready to greet him with 400 soldiers. And he got scared. And he prepared himself. For the Chazal say, he wanted to give him a bribe, and he was preparing himself for warfare. So when Esav saw him, he was surprised. Esav greeted him, he embraced him, and he kissed him. At that time, instead of what he wanted to kill him before, now he embraced him. So Rashi brings down the Medrash, Amar Rabbi Shimon Yochai, halacha, there's a halacha, b'yadua she'esav soines Yaakov. Esav hates Yaakov. But that time, his mercy was aroused. That's what Chazal is saying. Now the question is, why did Chazal use the lashon of a halacha? If Reuben hates Shimon, it's not a halacha. There's a reason why. It's an emotional feeling. It's a halacha that Esav hates Yaakov. So, in the Medrash says, at the end of the Parashas told us, he brings a very interesting, profound insight from Menachem Zema, one of the Torah sages in pre-World War II era. He says, why is it that our sages describe Esav's hatred towards Yaakov as a halacha? So he says as follows, they wish to define the true nature of anti-Semitism. Jews have been hated in all epochs and in every part of the globe, regardless of the extent of their assimilation, their adaptation to the prevailing culture. They have been harassed by nations in every country, no matter which class of society they belong, what trade or profession they engage in, or whatever they are, wealthy or poor. What is the root and the cause of this incomprehensible situation? So the Gentile hatred of the Jews does not fit into the framework of any sociological or any scientific theory. Its origin can only be explained by divine principle laid down by the Torah. It was prophesied to Rivka that the twins, when they were born, Yaakov and Esav, she carried, could not coexist, but one would have to be subordinate to the other. If Yaakov would fulfill his goal through this Torah study and faithfulness to the Torah, then Esav would be subjugated to him. But should Yaakov fail in his life's mission, then Esav's latent hostility would demonstrate itself in anti-Semitism, reminding Yaakov of his true goal in life. Thus, he says, anti-Semitism bears the character which is the black and white of halacha. Halacha is black and white, right? You have a drink, you make a shackle. There's such thing. There's no other brach for shackle. The halachas, when you could daven, what you daven, all the halachas are black and white. There's no gray areas in halachas. So here also there's no gray area. Esav hates Yaakov, he's not doing his will. He says it's an unalterable fact that is intrinsically rooted in the divine plan of the world. Our history proves that whenever the Jewish nation was loyal to Hashem, Esau was powerless. Thus, the lack of adherence to the Torah to the Torah and anti-Semitism have a cause and effect relationship. There's only one effective method of controlling anti-Semitism, and that's intensifying the Torah study. But some people will say, we find that nations are gently to the Jews, right? They're very complacent to them. The answer is, they're only friendly because they want their money, right? Because the Jews help the economy. And I'll prove it to you. After the terrorist attack, a recent terrorist attack in France and the unrest in the UK and England, so there was talk about a mass emigration of Jews leaving the country. So the government discouraged in saying how vital the Jews are for their economy and how much they deplore anti-Semitism. That's what they publicly said. But in reality, they didn't really mean it. Because they don't hesitate to criticize Israel, to boycott their products in Judea and Samaria and Yehuda and Shomron, with this a movement called the BDS, called Boycotting, Divesting, and Sanctions. Total contradiction and paradox to what they're saying. Because when you hate Israel, when you show hate to Israel, it's being hating the Jews. It's going to spread the anti-Semitism throughout the world. It leads to more worldwide anti-Semitism, and it's part of what you mentioned before, they're just not logical. They contradict themselves. Right? Now, recently, there's another interesting thing that happened, is that when a Jew is born in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, they won't write in his passport, born in Jerusalem, Israel. Because they don't recognize yet that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. They still can be part of the PA, the Palestinian Authority, born in Jerusalem. So again, all these little things that they do are just promoting anti-Semitism. And that doesn't make sense. On one hand, you want the Jews to stay there for your economy, which is for your money. On the other hand, you're criticizing them. So that's generally anti-Semitism in the world. In Eretz Yisrael, specifically, we have the two issues mentioned above. Assimilation and not yearning for the Gula. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to keep the anti-Semitism going in Israel also. I'll give you an example. How are the Jews in Israel assimilating with the non-Jews? First, you have to realize how the system works there. They have a democratic government. It's elected, right, in the Knesset, members of the Knesset. But the real one who has the final say is the Supreme Court and the Attorney General. They have the final say in all the laws. They say the countries are on democracy and not by the Torah. So even if the Knesset passes a law, right, they say you can't do something because it's against the Torah, if it's undemocratic, it's outlawed. Also, the whole state was established by Zionism to counteract anti-Semitism, to become a nation without Torah, to be like all the other nations, which by default, which we mentioned before, will never happen. Because the more we try to assimilate, the more anti-Semitism will be there to make sure that we don't. Just a simple example, quoting from the founders of Zionism, Theodor Herzl and Max Nordau. So Theodor Herzl wanted to establish Israel in Uganda. They didn't want to make the Jewish state in Israel. They wanted in Uganda, but they told him, who's going to go to Uganda? No Jews are going to go there. So he made it in Israel, made it in the homeland in Israel. So he's quoted as saying as follows. He said, the Rabbanim should rule over us? Never, he said. We'll look upon them, right, but we'll lock them up in their shuls. That's what he said. He's quoted as saying. His friend, Max Nordau, right, married a guy, and there's nothing wrong with it, because when a Jew marries a guy, right, she automatically becomes Jewish, and the children become Jewish also. Right? Nonsense. He refused to circumcise his son, that's the Herzl, his only son that he had, and the son eventually converted to Christianity. Same with Ben-Gurion. Ben-Gurion also married a non-Jew. These are all the founders of the Jewish state. In the early 1950s, there was mass emigration from Iran and Yemen. So when they came to Israel, right, and the Operation Flying Carpet, right, because they quoted the pasuk in the Torah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu take to Israel on the wings of an eagle, they took all the children away, cut their payas off, and told them in Israel you don't have to keep the Torah. Took them, and they become totally non-religious and secular, and that's why that's who majority of the population is today because of that. They told the parents here you don't have to keep mitzvahs. That was the founding part of the Medina, right, to assimilate, and that's why there's anti-Semitism. You look at the situation today, right, and it's a far cry, right, from what they wanted to do. There's more hatred than ever towards Israel, especially in the UN. They'll condemn every act of violence against the Arabs, but they'll never condemn an Arab terrorist attack, a missile attack, stone throwing, or fire bombs. They don't do that, right? No matter how much we prove that we are right and they are wrong, right, to show the world how democratic and civil the Jewish nation is, it doesn't help. Why? because the government keeps trying to undermine the basic Torah principles that keep the Jews separate from the Gentile nations. So Hashem is saying it's not going to help. Esav Sanis Yaakov, they're going to hate you. I'll give you some examples. Shabbos, keeping of Shabbos. The Jewish, in Jerusalem, they just opened a Planet Entertainment Complex on Shabbos, because it's still, within the Jewish law, and the law of the state, rather, that you can open that. Certain things you couldn't, certain things you can't. This complex has 16 movie theaters, pubs, and restaurants open on Shabbos. And they're constantly now making demonstrations to have it closed because it's going to make a trend. They have a Cinema City, also open on Shabbos. Today what made the news is what the Minister of Education wants to stop soccer playing on Shabbos. Because according to the law of the state, the soccer game is not supposed to be played on Shabbos. So the soccer team union, whatever, has told them, if we don't play on Shabbos, we're not playing at all. They're not playing at all. So we see that they're trying to assimilate. Chas v'shalom is starting a trend of Chilul Shabbos in other areas. In Tel Aviv, right, there's a movement to have buses to break the status quo. Buses don't run in Tel Aviv on Shabbos. The public transportation, they make the private transportation. The area of kashrus. Until now, if restaurants wanted to be kosher, they had it by the rabbinut, by the chief rabbinate, they could not be open on Shabbos. If they were, they took away their certificate, called the Tudah. Now, they want to change it. And they want to say, as long as any rabbi, even a reform, or an Orthodox who doesn't know anything about kashrus, will say it's kosher, we can advertise that we're kosher, and who knows what that will lead us to. In genealogy, in Yichus, who is a Jew? Miu Yehudi. Age-old question. Do you want to change the laws now also? Whoever keeps Judaism as a tradition can be called a Jew, no matter how he converted. Or as long as the father is Jewish, it doesn't make difference. The children could be Jewish also. They have what's called fast-track gerus they're trying to implement. They want to establish a local rabbinate, right, to undermine the courts that they have now, and not have the chief rabbinate okay conversions. They claim as follows: it's our moral obligation to ensure that these immigrants, who are non-Jews from Russia, wherever they come from, are absorbed into Israeli society for their sake. What's going on over here? The sake of the Jewish people? Do you have non-Jews for the sake of Jewish people? That's what they're saying. So that's what's going on with Yichus. Another area is the area of immorality, Gili Arayos. Recently there was a gay rights parade in Jerusalem, if you follow that. It's been going on for 1 or 2 years, big demonstrations. Jerusalem, the city of Yerushalayim, is mostly religious, and it's an abomination to have these people walk there. You want to go and Tel Aviv, the secular city, do it there, but don't come to Yerushalayim, in the holy city. Again, democracy reigns. What's democracy? People should be free to do as they please, to have an alternate lifestyle. Right? That's what democracy is. So they call these gay rights, these marriages of To'eva, the abomination. Now, after the recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling, again, United States of To'eva, they call it, right, of abomination, United States of abomination. So the Supreme Court stated that states are required to recognize and permit same-gender marriages. So when they did that, the defense minister of Israel, Moshe Ya'alon, said in his Facebook, he hopes that Israel will follow and give basic rights to all. That's what's going on now. The previous government, before this came into power, the government who was the prime minister who came into power, before Netanyahu came in, wanted to legalize, right, the same gender marriages, but he met too much opposition. So they made a compromise, and they get government benefits. They're not considered married, but they'll get governments, whatever children they have over there. This was done with the consent of the National Religious Party. What a Chilul Hashem, the Jewish home, right? Saying that they're giving rights. They should oppose it. The Chilul Hashem was that this party of the NRP, which is representing them now, combined with this Lapid, was an open apikuros, open heretic, right, to do this thing. And now, right, in the recent parade that they had, so there was an unfortunate tragedy where a Jew, a frum Jew, came over and stabbed somebody and killed him. Right? It's usher, totally usher. We don't take the other people's lives in our hands. We don't have to Bezim, we don't have Sanhedrin. It was usher. But after that was done, so the same head of the party, of the NRP, who okayed the stipends before, announced that he wants to compensate these gay rights and increase government aid to them, further creating a Chilul Hashem. So that's what we want to integrate. We want to become like the other nations, like America, the other countries. That's what's going on. It's a terrible tragedy. Hashem has to send more anti-Semitism in order to people to be aware. People should wake up to what they're doing. And the last thing is Talmud Torah, learning. It's the core of the Jewish nation, is the Torah learning. This is what keeps the Jewish nation alive. And it's not these that are under attack. Again, the Supreme Court in the previous government outruled what's called the Tal Law. The Tal Law was a law that allowed for deferment of yeshiva boys learning in yeshiva, not to go into the army as long as they're learning. They said it's unconstitutional, and they outlawed it. They made a whole tumult. Now there's a big controversy now how to fix it up, what to do, whatever it is. The oddity is that the MKs, the Knesset members who supported the law, who supported the draft yeshiva boys, never served themselves in the army. Unbelievable. These people never served in the army, and they want the yeshiva guys to go into the army. And again, the Medrash says that when the decrees take effect in the Jewish nation, when they cast, when the mashlichim, they degrade and they degrade the Torah learning, they cut government aid, causing much pressure on the kollels and yeshivas, but the universities and the sports teams continue to get their money. So Baruch Hashem, now in this present government, we have religious parties in the government, they're trying, in the coalition, and trying to help stem the tide. Another area of havoc is the new right-wing government, which is in power, is in a constant struggle to renew the Jewish presence on Har HaBayis, on the Temple Mount. They want to allow people to pray there and to carry on other rituals there on Har HaBayis. So first of all, the halacha is a Jew is not allowed to go on there. All the Rabbanim, the Torah poskim, right, of today's generation, Rav Oza of the Hasidim, Rav Yasha of the Litvish, and Rav Avad Yosef of the Sfardim, they all said it's usher. Besides all the Rabbanim of the previous generation, not even thought about going on Har HaBayis. Right? It's the prohibition of Koris. Koris means like eating on Yom Kippur when you go there. And it means that the punishment of the person may die before he's 60 years old. It was never a question to go on there. So what happens? The younger Rabbanim, the contemporary Rabbanim come up from the NRP again, claiming that it's okay to go there if you go to the mikveh and you go to certain parts. So just imagine, I explain this as follows. A person needs a complicated brain operation. So he goes to the biggest neurosurgeons in the country, and they told him you have to do procedure A. But he wants to compare, so he goes to smaller doctors, right, interns or whatever, and they say, no, you got to do procedure B. What would he do? He would never think of the second one, because the biggest one said to do the first procedure. When it comes to a person's life, you take the experts, they decide. So here also, who are we listening to? We listen to the Rabbanim? We have to listen to the poskim, the Gdolei Hador, the Torah giants. They tell us it's us, it's the Isser Koris. That's what we have to do. Now, Rabbi Victor Miller also said that it's a bracha, it's a blessing that the Temple Mount is in the hands of the Arabs. Why? The Muslims. Because there is no Avodah Zarah, they have no idols there. There's no priestess there. You don't see how they dress. There's no women going for priestess there. And it's not a tourist attraction. They keep it holy. Imagine if they wouldn't have, right, if they wouldn't have the control. If we'd be in control of it. Chas V'Shalom, the Gay Rights Parade would go on Har HaBayis. Gevalt, Yisrigan. Well, it happened. They said, why not? Democracy. They have a tourist attraction. They have kiosks there, taking pictures, all kinds of ceremonies and singing there. It's kept holy. Rabbi Yashav, right, one of the big poskim of the previous, who just passed away a few years ago, told Shimon Peres, the previous president of the Israeli government, he said, because he used to visit him on Sukkot, he told, keep the Jews off Har HaBayis, because they're looking for trouble, and how true it is. They're causing unnecessary incitement, adding oil to the fire by doing that. So this is the first reason why there's unrest in Eretz Yisrael, the blatant violation of serious and severe Isurim prohibitions and Torah prohibitions. The second issue, the last one I want to speak about, is the Arab-Israeli conflict. Can it be resolved? In one word, the answer is no. Why? Because according to the Islamic law, once a land is settled by Muslims, it belongs to them forever. Whoever chases them off is there illegally. They have to reclaim it. They'll never be satisfied until all the Jews leave Eretz Yisrael. They will liberate Eretz Yisrael from the Jews. When Ehud Barak, a previous prime minister, offered 90% of the occupied land to Arafat, right, the big terrorist, Yamach Shemam, he refused because he wanted the whole thing. A little piece, he wanted the whole thing to belong to the Muslims.
97%.
What?
97%.
What?
80%.
97. Okay, better. 97%. So 3% is like nothing. They view Israel as occupied territory. Therefore, everything is legitimate to claim it back. Moreover, to them, reclaiming Eretz Yisrael is at the cost, right, of Lahavdil, doing Hashem's will. This is God's will. They view themselves as Hashem's emissaries, as Kadoshim, holy people, and carrying out His will, to destroy evil from the world by getting rid of the Jews. Therefore, suicide bombers are martyrs, right? They compensated for it. Their families are compensated because they did something holy. They are glorified because they destroyed evil from the world. There's an interesting insight from one of the commentators in the Torah, Rabbeinu Bachye, who writes that throughout the exile, we had enemies and we had people who hate us. They're called Sonim and Oyavim, enemies and people who hate us. The Sonei, people who hate us, are Esav, right, which is most of the world. But he said the Soni is different than an enemy as follows. A Soni has a merciful side. You could eventually make peace with them, you can bribe them, give them concessions, you can lobby, right, and they can come close to the government, which we see in the Jewish nation. They can make peace, they can survive there. But an Oyev, an enemy, there's no way, there's an eternal hatred. That's why Oyev is like Avoy, woe to us. How many ceasefires were broken between Israelis and the Arabs? How many times they sat down on peace talks? It didn't go. And they're all back to square one, right? After many, many years, as if nothing happened. Therefore, a two-state solution is a joke. It's an invitation for terror, like South Lebanon happened when they left South Lebanon. So you got the Hezbollah there, you left Gaza, so Gaza became Hamasistan, the Hamas came there, but the world doesn't get it. We're dealing with an enemy that doesn't want peace, so there will not be any peace until Mashiach comes in Meher of Yameinu. Just to end up with the Rambam, which will give us some little bit of inspiration. The Rambam writes at the end of, in the first paragraph of Hilchos Tainis, when Hashem brings suffering on Jewish nation, it's a sign to improve our ways. You have to do tshuva. But if we persist in thinking that's coincidental, which it says in the parsha in Bachukosai, V'alachta imi b'keri, you'll come, everything's a coincidence, it'll bring more troubles to the Jewish nation, because we ignored a wake-up call to improve our ways. So let's get Hashem's messages once and for all, so we can be saved from future tragedies and bring the eventual Gula to the Jewish nation. Okay, thank you. Anybody want to ask any questions? Yeah.
What, like with Israel, and they would say there's a Jewish people, it's run by a Jewish state. What is this like making it democracy and not going by what the rabbis say? I don't understand why other Jews wouldn't listen to them. I don't understand.
I don't understand it either. But that's what Zionism was. Zionism was to have a Jewish state without the Torah.
Doesn't make sense.
So
it's Jewish, it needs to have the Torah.
You're 100% right, but read the writings of the Zionists.
Can't the big rabbis go in and straighten these people out? Make them see the light?
I'm sure they tried before. Now, I always say, when the Pope comes to Israel, the only person wearing a yarmulke is the Pope. Nobody else is wearing a yarmulke.
Did they train people all over the world with Torah? Maybe that will,
Well, they've been trying for 60 years, nothing has happened, so I don't think you'll get the vote. Both things you can do is be in the Knesset and try and stop any evil decrees against the Frum people there and keep the status quo. That'll be the best we can hope for, not to make it worse.
And also, what happens when you have an enemy like this? What do? You have an enemy.
Daven to Hashem. That's what I mean. Daven to Hashem. They should get rid of them. Nothing else you can do.
It's in Hashem's hands.
That's right. So we have to daven and we have to do more mitzvahs and Hashem should
You have to do what you can do to protect yourself.
Right, protect yourself and hopefully protect other Jews. Every parak of Tehillim, every chapter of Tehillim, every tefillah could save another Jew. Yeah. Right? They say that there are many terrorist attacks that we don't know about because they don't reveal them, are being prevented, by the Israeli Secret Service, by the Shabak it's called, the Shin Bet, but they don't tell anybody because they want people to know about it. But they're doing a lot of good work there. So it's only because of our tefillahs that they grab them right away. Before it starts.
Yeah, and this two-state thing. I mean, I don't even understand how people could even think of that. It's like they're ignorant. I mean, it's just to me, it's unreal.
The reason why they want two-state thing is they want the Nobel Prize. Okay, that's the truth of the matter is.
Work for 1 minute.
That's what they say. It's not going to work for 1 minute. When Peres and Rabin made peace with they made this famous thing. So why they got the Nobel Prize? They got $100,000 each, whatever it is. But right away, the whole thing is null and void. Say the whole Oslo Treaty is nothing. That's what it is. So therefore, you're right. You're 100% right. But the world doesn't get it.
And some rabbi once said, if all the Jews kept Shabbos, then we should. Right.
So I'll say that. Yeah, 2 Shabbosim, 1 Shabbos, not 1, 2 Shabbosim. But again, we We don't know when that'll happen. There are movements now that make a Shabbos to everybody, and we'll see. And I once traveled to Australia, so there was a movement there to find a Jew in every town to see if they can be more observant or something. They're all spread out all over the world, all over Australia. But there's something.
In terms of prediction, what's expected in terms of Iran, the role it will play in the future?
That who will play?
The role that Iran will play in the future.
We don't know. Let's see what happens with the agreement. If they'll live up to their agreement, they won't live up to their agreement. What's going to happen? Who knows? We don't know what's going to happen.